But look, Lisa Nandy was not being lazy. She was being devious. She was projecting to manipulate public opinion of the Reform Party. Let's remember, Labour are cancelling elections. Labour are were forcing digital ID on people. Labour are forcing facial recognition cameras throughout the UK, OK? They're cancelling jury trials. They're threatening to close social media platforms. They're locking people up for speech crimes or online crimes. That, for me, is the definition of fascism. So they are saying that we are what they are.
The British political landscape has just undergone a transformation so radical it makes a chameleon in a bag of Skittles look positively indecisive. We are not just talking about a change in policy, we are talking about a full-scale tectonic shift that has left Westminster pundits reaching for the smelling salts and the general public wondering if they have accidentally wandered into a high-stakes episode of Doctor Who. While you were busy worrying about the price of a pint or whether it is actually going to rain for the 14th consecutive day, the very foundations of the United Kingdom's strategy have been dismantled and rebuilt with a cheeky grin and a bit of get-on-with-it attitude. It is bold, it is arguably slightly mad, and it is exactly what happens when you decide to stop playing by the old rules of the game. Quick favour, if you are loving this, hit that subscribe button. Over 92% of viewers haven't yet. It's free. Takes a second and means the world to us. Thanks, if you did. Now back to the show. Good day to you all. Welcome back to the British Report. If you have been keeping an eye on the headlines this week, you will know that the political climate in 2026 is feeling less like a steady ship and more like a jet-powered hovercraft skimming across a lake of unpredictability. Sir Keir Starmer has just dropped a metaphorical anvil into the middle of the North Sea, and the ripples are currently drenching everyone from the City of London to the small-town high streets of the north. It is being hailed by some as a masterstroke of geopolitical genius and by others as the ultimate hold-my-beer moment of modern governance. But regardless of where you sit on the green benches, one thing is certain, the old guard is officially in the rearview mirror and the road ahead is looking decidedly experimental.
To be really clear about what I think about Reform and Nigel Farage, I think we've been here many times in history before. Certainly when I was growing up in the 1980s in Manchester, I come from a mixed race background. I've seen this playbook before where people try to scapegoat and demonise other people, try to pit us against one another and divide us from one another, try to make people feel that people who are somehow different to you pose some kind of threat, and they do it for one reason and one reason alone, because they have no answers to the problems that the country face. It takes this country to some very dark and dangerous places, and I think we should have no truck with it at all. There is one group
would say
of
you're
people
cancelling
who are
elections.
responsible living with the consequence. Well, I've got a lot of experience of living with the consequences of othering and people who are trying to divide us from one another. And I guess I would just say that if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, in my experience, it usually is a duck.
Now, let us dive into the meat of the matter. For decades, Britain's foreign and economic policy was about as predictable as a Sunday roast, reliable, a bit heavy on the gravy, and essentially the same every time. But Starmer has just looked at the traditional special relationship and decided it needed a bit of an open relationship makeover. We are seeing a pivot toward emerging markets and strategic alliances that would have made the diplomats of the 1990s fall off their ergonomic chairs. It is as if the UK suddenly realised that being a bridge between the US and Europe was all well and good until both sides started charging a toll and the bridge itself began to creak under the weight of outdated expectations. The analogy here is simple. Imagine you have been going to the same local pub for 40 years because your granddad did. Then, one day, you realise the beer is flat, the locals are grumpy, and there is a vibrant new cocktail bar across the street that actually knows how to make a decent mojito. Starmer is currently leading the country across that street, and while the old boys at the pub are shouting about loyalty and tradition, the rest of the world is already at the bar ordering a round of strategic investments. It is a gamble, certainly, but in a world that is moving at the speed of a fibre optic cable, standing still is just a polite way of falling behind. Of course, you cannot have a grand pivot without a bit of economic drama. The Treasury is currently operating like a high-stakes casino where the house always wins, except the house is now a collection of green energy tech firms and decentralised financial hubs. The move to aggressively subsidise homegrown British tech while simultaneously courting heavy hitters from the Indo-Pacific region is a bit like trying to bake a souffle in a hurricane. If it works, it is a magnificent feat of culinary engineering. If it fails, you are left with a very expensive, sticky mess on the floor of the Exchequer.
Well, Labour are looking at dropping mandatory digital IDs. Reform...
Let's be honest here. Let's tell the viewers why. Labour got hit with a 3 million petition against digital ID, mandatory digital ID. They realised that they'd messed up in a big way and that there was going to be protests and people weren't having it. So they've had to U-turn. But they're going to try and do it via the back door. Let's be honest with that.
What does that mean?
Right, well, look...
So basically it is Labour policy.
Well, yes. It has been Labour policy. So, Dean, yes, Labour government banning social media. Is it a Labour or Reform policy?
So this is a Conservative policy, which is going to be voted on tomorrow. It's a brilliant policy, brainchild of Laura Trott, supported by Kemi Badnoch, and I really hope that Labour are going to support it tomorrow and that we are going to ban social media for children under 16.
The sceptics are out in force, of course. They are pointing to the ghost of Sunak, claiming that these policies are just a polished version of the previous administration's pipe dreams. But there is a key difference here, the energy. Where the previous lot seemed to be managing decline with a stiff upper lip, the current regime is leaning into the chaos with a manic sort of glee. It is the difference between a headmaster politely asking the students to stop setting fire to the bins and a new teacher who decides to use the fire to teach a lesson on thermodynamics. It is punchy, it is slightly terrifying, and it is keeping the markets on their toes. As we navigate this new era, there is a lingering question that feels like a stone in the national shoe. What exactly are we trying to be? We have spent so long defining ourselves by what we aren't, European, American, merely an island, that we have forgotten to figure out what we are. The current political narrative is trying to forge a new British identity based on pragmatic innovation, which is basically a fancy way of saying we will work with anyone who has a big enough checkbook and a decent Wi-Fi connection. It is a bit of a departure from the old land of hope and glory vibe, replacing the hope with spreadsheets and the glory with gross domestic product. Think of it like a middle-aged man who suddenly trades in his sensible Volvo for a sleek electric motorbike and starts talking about disrupting the paradigm. It is a bit awkward to watch at first, and there are definitely some growing pains, but you cannot deny that he looks like he is having a lot more fun. The challenge for the government is to ensure that this new identity doesn't just alienate the people who like the Volvo. You can't just tell a nation to be innovative and expect them to suddenly stop caring about the fact that the local library has been turned into a boutique co-working space for influencers.
Is it Labour or is it Reform policy? Adam, I think you just
Labour.
nudged that one. Yeah, go on. What's going on there?
Well, they're trying to get a definition that works for them. But at the end of the day, it's just going to be, what is the word?
But they're going to call it anti-Muslim hate laws. Now, I think obviously we were talking, this is all because of these, I think, very silly comments made by Lisa Nandy. We've seen similar comments by the Justice Secretary, likening them to...
I think we have to be really, really accurate about what was asked and what was said. She was asked whether there was a risk that they might become fascists in government. And frankly, she didn't answer the question head on, which I think is telling in itself. Now, is there a risk that Reform becomes fascist? Maybe. We don't know. We haven't seen what happens yet. I'm slightly concerned that Reform is a party that is essentially owned by one man, legally. It's a limited company. And for a party like that to be in government would be extremely unusual. I'm also very disturbed by Reform's immigration policy and its talk of mass deportations and deportations of legal immigrants.
Brilliant.
To me, that starts moving towards fascism. I'm not going to say that they've gone there yet, because I don't think they have, but it's certainly trending in that direction.
While the government is busy reimagining the future, the opposition is currently wandering around the political wilderness like a group of tourists who have lost their map and their sense of direction. They are trying to find a hook, a way to convince the public that the Starmer masterstroke is actually a Starmer shambles. But the problem is that the public is quite enjoying the spectacle. It is hard to sell a return to stability when stability was starting to feel a lot like boredom. The opposition needs to find a way to be more than just the party of no, Otherwise, they risk becoming as relevant as a floppy disk in a cloud computing world. The analogy here is a boxing match where one fighter is throwing wild, unpredictable haymakers while the other is standing perfectly still, reciting the rules of the Marquis of Queensberry. Sure, the second guy is technically correct, but he is also the one getting hit in the face. To get back into the game, the opposition needs to stop complaining about the footwork and start throwing some punches of their own. They need a vision that is just as bold, just as witty, and dare I say it, just as high energy as the one currently being beamed into our living rooms.
But you've just listed a load of things that allegedly they've done and said that that's the definition of fascism.
Well, for me, it's
So
nearer to fascism than anything.
Fascists?
It's nearer to fascism than anything that Reform are saying that they're going to do.
That doesn't quite add up then.
Why not?
Well, because you said these are certain things that Labour have done that are fascist, but
Well,
Labour are not fascist.
they're labelling.
Are they or aren't they?
They're labelling
Well,
Reform as fascist
well,
when
well-
they are nearer to fascism than Reform on their current policies.
Well, I think this is the thing, isn't it? And this is why I asked the question, because actually when you start talking about what fascism is, when I ask a lot of people, they can't even define it. And by using these silly words, far right, fascist, we actually take the power away to actually point fingers at people who might be those things. And that is very dangerous for a society, and you smear possibly millions of people with the word fascism. It creates a very, very dangerous environment.
But also
Very briefly,
we're distracting from the central question, which is that we have a government in power which is destroying our economy. And that is the biggest problem.
So where does this leave us? We are standing at the edge of a new frontier, looking out at a world that is increasingly complicated, fiercely competitive, and entirely uninterested in British exceptionalism, unless it comes with a competitive tax rate. Starmer's shift is a recognition of that reality. It is an admission that the old ways of doing business are as dead as the dodo, and the only way to survive is to be faster, sharper, and a little bit more ruthless than the competition. It is a lesson in adaptation that even the most hardened critics have to respect, even if they hate the person delivering it.
I asked Lisa Nandy this morning whether she would describe, whether it is true that she used the word fascist to describe a potential Nigel Farage-led government. She didn't say that she did not, and she ended the interview by saying, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, and quacks like a duck, then you know what it is. What do you make of that?
Well, I'd say if people actually look at the dictionary definition and then of what fascist means and then look at what this Labour government has done, what has Keir Starmer done? He's cancelled elections now for a grand total around 7.5 million people in a short period of time, including millions of those people have had them cancelled 2 years in a row. His Justice Secretary is withdrawing the right to jury trials. That has been a right that's been around since the Magna Carta. His Attorney General is making, I think, unprecedented and extraordinary political attacks against the Prime Minister's key political rivals. Those, if we're going to start labelling people as such, well, those things sound far, far more worrying than anything Nigel Farage has ever said or done.
Are you putting the F word on Labour now?
Well, I'm not, because I think that if you overuse those words and you throw around these sorts of labels, and it's not just that word, it's obviously many other sort of extreme political rhetoric. Number one, you cheapen that language, right? You diminish the memories of the people who suffered under people who were those things. And number two, you make politics in this country even more dangerous than it is. So I think it's deeply irresponsible to do.
British politics in 2026 isn't about right or left anymore. It is about relevant or redundant. The current administration has chosen relevancy, and they are willing to burn the old rulebook to get there. It is a thrilling, suspenseful and occasionally hilarious ride, and we are all buckled into the passenger seat whether we like it or not. The only thing left to do is see if this jet-powered hovercraft can actually make it across the lake, or if we are all about to get very, very wet. Thank you for watching the British Report. If you want to keep up with the madness as it unfolds, make sure to stay tuned for our next update. Good day.